Welcome to the meeting of Assembly Committee on Education for the 2023 legislative session. Secretary, will you please call the roll?
Assemblywoman Anderson. Present. Assemblyman De Silva. Here. Assemblywoman Hanson. Here. Assemblywoman Hardy. Here. Assemblyman Koenig. Here. Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch. Assemblyman MacArthur. Here. Assemblywoman Mosca. Here. Assemblywoman Taylor.
Present.
Assemblywoman Thomas. Here. Assemblywoman Torres.
Here.
Chair Bilbray Axelrod.
I am here, and we are all here. Well, welcome to everyone here in Carson City. I see a few people in Vegas, and for those of you following along online, welcome. Just a reminder to silence anything that possibly makes noise. I'm doing it right now. If you wish to testify, please give a card to our committee secretary and sign in. And then when you are up, make sure you say your name and spell your name every time you speak, and turn off the microphone. Sorry, I'm like a little discombobulated there for a second. Committee members will be using their laptops during committee. Please don't take this as a sign of disrespect. We're looking at documents and exhibits that have been provided to us. Remember that we will be limiting testimony. We are down to basically the last month. Pretty exciting. So we will have 20 minutes in support, 20 minutes in opposition, and 20 minutes in neutral. With that, let's get started. We're going to hear two bills today. We'll begin with Senate Bill 114, and then we will hear Senate Bill 292. I will now open the hearing on Senate Bill 114. This measure revises provisions governing to the Nevada Interscholastic Activity Association. To present this measure, I have Senator Flores, formerly from this committee. Welcome. I'm going to scooch over. You can stay in that chair, just scooch a little that way. Perfect. Do you guys not use the word scooch? Okay, scooch. Scooch. Thank you for scooching. And begin when you're ready.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, Vice Chair, and esteemed colleagues of the Assembly Education Committee. I am Senator Edgar Flores, here to present Senate Bill 114. I proudly represent Senate District 2, and I'd like to just kind of give everybody a rundown of the genesis of this bill. I would then like to walk you through the bill, and I also have a proposed amendment that we decided on literally just a few hours ago. Rather than confuse the committee and submit a bunch of additional documents, we'll go directly into the bill. All I am doing is eliminating language that I proposed, and I'll walk you through that. So the genesis of the bill. During the intro,
Can I just interrupt you for 1 second?
Yes.
So I'm just noticing that we have some people signed in. Is the reason that you are removing that is that getting people to a place of yes?
we had a Senator Edgar Flores, for the record. Thank you, Madam Chair, for that. We had a working group this morning, and I'm appreciative, and I'll speak to them in a second. I appreciate their time. We met with them. They raised concerns. Based on the concerns that were brought forth, I decided to amend the bill. However, I have not had a firm commitment from anyone that by me doing that, they would come and become supportive of the bill, so I don't want to mistake
Understood.
the facts.
Understood. Thank you for the clarification.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Edgar Flores, for the record. So like many of you, during the interim, I reached out to a whole host of stakeholders, including many of the schools in my district, to try to identify issues that I can bring forth to the legislature. And amongst those conversations, I had an opportunity to speak with some of our schools who brought up an issue regarding high school sports, which is the entire focal point of this bill. And if I could provide some context, there was a student who had applied to be a part of a charter school, and as you know, there's an open enrollment period, you apply, but it's a lottery system for charter schools. So let me walk you through this hypothetical because this is specifically where the bill started. A student is in 8th grade. They want to go to charter school A, and they're zoned for Desert Pines. Okay? That student, unfortunately, doesn't get into charter school A because it's a lottery system. All the slots are allocated. Unfortunately, the student doesn't get in. So instead, they go to Desert Pines. A month and a half into being a student at Desert Pines, which was not the school of his choosing originally, he gets a call from charter school A, and they tell him, guess what? There's now a vacancy. You're next in line. We can give you the school you originally wanted to go to. The student gets excited, says, absolutely, that's awesome, and then enrolls now in the charter school. Because of how the rules are written presently, when you transfer to, and this is high school, okay, we're not addressing middle school or elementary school. When you transfer from one school to another, after the initial enrollment, right? So after the transition from 8th grade to 9th grade. So whether it be 9th grade, 10th grade, 11th grade, 12th grade. Once you transfer, you're ineligible to participate in sports for 180 days. And there is a very important reason for that. And I just want to make it abundantly clear that I am not under NAC 3885B. There's a whole host of issues addressed there with recruitment that makes it unlawful, right? An administrator, a coach, XYZ, cannot go to a student and say, look, you're very good at this sport. I'm going to recruit you and bring you to my school. I'm not touching any of that. That remains unlawful, prohibited conduct. I'm not changing that. But I felt bad for that student who initially wanted to go to that school, and the only reason they didn't get in was because of the lottery system. And I felt bad that we were prohibiting that student from participating in sports for 180 days. Namely, because right now, we know there isn't a single member of this body who has not engaged with a constituent who has issues, particularly with the minors. It is hard for students. COVID was to the detriment of every single child in this state. And getting students to want to be enthusiastic and motivated to go to school, sometimes, for some students, it's not enough that they have really great teachers working really hard. For some students, the only glue that keeps that student showing up every day is sports. I grew up playing sports. In high school, sports were incredibly important to me. They give community a sense of identity, right? Your parents wear the hat, whoever's taking care of you. It establishes alliances and friendships that are going to be long-lasting beyond the school year. And then also, it's a great way for a student to become assimilated and become a part of something bigger. This is particularly true. Imagine if a student moving from another school district or from out of state, they're in 11th grade, they're coming in. Sports is a phenomenal way of them creating culture and making friends really quickly. So my entire focal point at that point was, well, how do I address that particular scenario? So the original bill was addressing specifically that hypothetical. If a student wanted to transfer to another school that they originally wanted to be a part of, they wanted to be a part of that charter school, they wanted to be a part of that magnet school, but a lottery system kept them out, they should be able to participate and play sports there. And the 180-day exemption, they should be excluded from that. However, upon engaging that conversation, one of the things that was raised was that it was unfair that we were just doing it for charter schools and magnet schools, because they're the only ones that have a lottery system, that maybe it'd be better if we have one transparent rule across the board. And that's the second portion of the bill that I added. I then afterwards had an opportunity to reach out and speak with teachers, but specifically with principals and admin. And they were concerned specifically that the NIA, which is the Nevada Interscholastic Activities Association, would retaliate because they came to the legislature. Now, there is an NIA body that you can go to, and they have a whole host of authority to create NAC. But they were concerned that they might be subjected to retaliation for coming and speaking to their legislator, which is crazy to me. Our single most important job is to represent our constituency. And no human being should ever be afraid of speaking to us. So, to address that concern, I said I am going to put some safeguards to ensure that any school knows that they have the authority to speak to us whenever they want, and that the NIA's existence is because we allow them to be there. And so I wanted to send a very clear message that that is our role. I also wanted to make sure, because another complaint is that the NIA doesn't have an appeals process. And so parents started reaching out to me, because once I opened this chapter, a whole host of individuals started reaching out with concerns. And I want to put some concerns that go against my bill on the record too, because I think it's fair to address those, and I promised I would. But I want to go the other way for now. One of the issues that was raised was that there's no appeals process. And what if a student is being denied an opportunity to engage in sports, or what if a school can't participate in sanctions, whatever it may be? Who can they appeal to? And I said that's absolutely fair. We should have an appeals process in general. As an attorney, I absolutely think an appeals process is absolutely essential. I think it's important that we have them in our schools. So that's where that comes from. Now, I do want to bring some concerns that were raised, and which is why we are amending the bill. So now I'm going to go into the bill, and I'll walk section by section. But I want to first start with the amendment. So if you go in the bill, if you go to page 4 of the bill, and I am now looking at, I just want to make sure the booklet reads the same as my printout. It does. So I am now looking at page 4, lines 7, 8, and 9. At page 4, lines 26, 27, 28. And page 4, lines 32, 33, and 34. That is all new language that I had originally proposed. And what that language said was what where the conversation started. If you apply to a charter school, or you apply to a magnet school, or any school that has a lottery system, that you get, in essence, at that time, the way it was written, unlimited amounts of transfers, and you would continue to be eligible for sports. And one of the concerns that was raised is, like, it feels like you're unfairly protecting charter schools and magnet schools. And that's fair. So instead of doing that, I am striking out all that language. So again, on page 4 of the bill, lines 7, 8, and 9, striking it out. On page 4, lines 26, 27, 28, striking it out. And lines 32, 33, and 34, striking it out. So that now charter schools and magnet schools don't have a unique rule that applies only to them. And rather, I'm going to keep the language in the middle, which is lines 13 through 21 on page 4, that reads, notwithstanding any provisions of the law, to the contrary, a pupil who transfers from one school to another school, who would not otherwise be immediately eligible to participate in and practice in a sanctioned sport or other interscholastic activity or event at a school to which the pupil transfers as a result of the transfer may, not more than once in his or her lifetime, elect to be immediately eligible to participate and practice in any sanctioned sport or other interscholastic activity or event at a school to which the pupil transfers. That is a long-winded way of saying now everybody gets one time. Any student, you're moving from out of state, you're moving from another school, you're moving from another school district, one transfer, everybody remains eligible. And that way it applies to everybody across the board, and it still addresses my issue, because where the hypothetical and where the concern started with me was with a lottery system, and that student not being eligible, that captures them. But what I am removing is the perpetuity of transferring to a public school and back, right? We're removing that language. So that's why I have that there. now I'll walk back to page 2 of the bill. And as I previously mentioned, I wanted to make sure that we didn't have any issues of retaliation. So under section 1, lines 3 through 7, it just reads, the Nevada Interscholastic Activity Association shall not penalize, retaliate against, or otherwise take any adverse action against a school or person for participating in the legislative process or advocating for or against any policy before a public body. That is just me making it abundantly clear, and I don't think anybody would disagree that retaliation should not be an issue, and we're just making it abundantly clear that that is 100% the way we're going to move forward, in case anybody wanted to try anything else. And then, in that same page, page 2, lines 19 through 20, 18 through 20, is where we put in the language that there is now an appeals process. That's all it is, and it goes to the state board. Should there be an issue, you can elevate the appeal, you bring up the issue, and if they agree, then that's where it ends. But at least now there's a second pair of eyes looking at something in case anybody feels they're being unfairly targeted. That is the essence and the core of the bill. That is the reason we're bringing it forward. There is absolutely 100% the NIAA that this is what they do. They're involved in this conversation daily. They obviously are passionate about this subject matter, and they absolutely should be a part of the conversation, which is why they were part of the conversation this morning, and we've amended the language after conversing with them. That's why they were part of the conversation before I presented the bill the first time, and we added some language there. I absolutely agree with that. There was a concern raised to me, if they already exist, why are we as a legislative body taking any type of action? And my honest response to that is because that is our job. That is literally the one thing we are sent to do here, to listen to issues and address them. That's exactly why we exist. That is the sole purpose of any human with a title in this building. And so that's why we're doing it. And then I also had concerns about recruiting, and legitimate concerns were brought up because if we have this one-time transfer rule, there's concerns that we might get the best athletes of whatever sport and try to recruit them and use the one-time transfer rule to come and play in a particular school. But I want to remind everybody that that conduct is prohibited, and I am not touching that. It's under NAC 385B. That remains prohibited conduct. If a school realizes that, and it's typically other schools, right, or students that bring it up, wait a minute, they got a phone call, this happened, they try to incentivize them by doing X, Y, Z, that remains prohibited conduct, and there's already language in NAC to address that. And with that, Madam Chair, I am open for any questions you may have.
Thank you for the presentation. We do have a number of questions. I'll just let you know, so my committee knows as well. We'll start with Vice Chair, and then we'll go to Assemblywoman Anderson, Assemblyman Koenig, Torres, LaRue Hatch. Anybody else? Yes. And Claire Thomas, you will bring up the rear on the first round of questions. Okay, so first Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator, for bringing this bill forward and presenting this. I'm going to ask if you will, as you were speaking, I didn't want to interrupt you. If you can, you gave us page numbers and line numbers, and my bill didn't line up with yours. My printout, I guess I should say, that's probably better stated.
Understood.
Yes, if you wouldn't mind, as a start, just so I can mark those
Yes,
accordingly.
absolutely.
I apologize. Again, I didn't want to interrupt you, but
I
I want to make sure
appreciate
I'm
that.
following.
So I am looking at, but I will say the sections to be abundantly clear.
Thank you very much.
I am looking at section 1.5, page 4, lines 7, 8, and 9, which read, transfers to a charter school or transfers to a school that uses a lottery system to determine which pupils may enroll.
Yeah,
I'm striking that language out.
Okay.
That's no longer part of the bill.
Yes, sir.
And then under section 2, where it reads on lines 26 through 28, children who transfer to a charter school, children who transfer to a charter to a school that uses a lottery system to determine which pupils may enroll, striking that language out.
Okay.
In sub 2, again, page 4, lines 32 through 34, that read, children who transfer to a charter school, children who transfer to a school that uses a lottery system to determine which pupils may enroll, striking that language as well.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I'm going to start with there and review that again. So if you wouldn't mind coming back for me, Chair, Madam Chair, thank
I
you.
can do
Thank you,
that.
Senator.
Thank you.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Senator, for bringing forward the language and for also taking the questions and everything. My question does have to do actually with the language that is remaining on page 4, section 1.3. Has there been discussion at all with NIAA about any sort of language that they are possibly considering to utilize already when it comes to this, and or any other sort of discussion that they are having internally? Because I believe they meet like every 2 or 3 months. I'm not sure of their schedules. So I just didn't know if there had already been discussion about this with them.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Anderson. Edgar Flores for the record. And Madam Chair, I didn't ask per decorum, but is it okay if I go direct? Is it okay if I go direct?
Yes,
Madam Chair?
I am so sorry. I was reading our chat. I apologize.
Oh, no.
Yes,
Thank
please
you,
go
Madam Chair.
direct.
I just wanted to be respectful of the committee. Senator Edgar Flores for the record. Anecdotally, in conversations individually, I know that this was being considered, but I do not want to say that a vote was taken. I do not want to say that it was formally discussed. I don't know the extent of that conversation. I would be misstating the record if I said that. In my conversations, they did mention that that was a conversation that was being contemplated. But I don't know to what extent, and I don't know how involved the body was with that. So I don't want to misstate the record.
Thank you, and I might ask, I don't know if they'll be coming up to the table later or not, so if the chair is comfortable, I might ask them that as well. Good deal. And then my other question has to do with, how many students do you believe that this could possibly impact, or do you have any of that information? Because I think there's a significant difference from the charter school activities athletically in the Clark County area than there is in the Washoe County area. So I just didn't know how many students that could affect.
Thank you for that question, Assemblywoman Anderson. Senator Edgar Flores for the record. I don't know the exact number of students that transfer, but I can ask the school districts if they could just provide how many students transfer per year and give you a rough estimate based on just the amount of transfers. Obviously, not every student participates in sports, but at a minimum, I could tell you this is how many students transfer per year that would potentially be impacted in a high school setting.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. And next, we will go to Assemblyman Koenig.
Welcome. So I want to first start off and say that I was a previous NIA board member. I mean, over my 3 years, I probably spent 100 hours talking about what's best for the kids of this state when it comes to athletics. I mean, it's been about 10 years since I've been on, but I mean, I don't like being portrayed as people that are going to sit around and figure out how to retaliate people that would come to this meeting. I think that's pretty ridiculous, and it's almost insulting to the members of the NIA board to assume that they were going to sit around and retaliate for a student for coming to this hearing. But anyways, moving on. When you were talking about your amendment, I was hoping you were going to scratch out Section 1, subsection 3 instead of the ones that you did. I was hoping that that's the part that you were going to get rid of, but that's the only part that's left. And so it's been 10 years, so isn't there something that if you transfer, you can play sub-varsity? So you could play JV sports, but you can't play varsity sports. So unless that's changed in the last 10 years, you're talking about a freshman. Unless he's a really good freshman, I don't know what the quality of the charter school he was transferring into, but that kid could still play JV for one season and then still have 3 years left of varsity under the current. So you're not telling this kid you cannot play any sports. All you're saying is you can't play varsity sports for a year. That's part of what you have to sit out and do.
Thank you for that. Thank you for that question, Assemblyman. Senator Edgar Flores for the record. Kind of. So I'll start off with your opening remarks. I wouldn't have just added language in there if I didn't think that there was threatening emails that were sent out. So I wasn't going to go there, but she opened the door, and I appreciate that. So there was emails that were sent out, and there was folk. It was pretty forceful, and so I took it upon myself to ensure that those type of emails don't get sent out. Secondly, regarding your hypothetical, I agree with you that a 8th grader which is where the issue started, right? An 8th grader hoping to go to a charter school or any school that requires a lottery system. I agree with you that in that hypothetical, a student could maybe later transfer and maybe play JV. But there's two things that I wanted to make clear. It's also possible that that student doesn't get to go to the school of their choosing until later, right? They reapply, and now they do it again in 10th grade. And that rule would again apply to them. Because the reality is, not every school mold fits every student, right? A charter school might be better for some students. I tell you personally, my best friend has 2 of his 3 kids at a charter school in my district and another kid not. And that's just because those 2 kids, their grades went up, their social skills were a lot better. The glue in that classroom setting was just better for them. And the other student decided to stay at their zone school. And so students will realize that. And they'll go back and forth. They may go to the charter school and realize, I tried it for a year, a semester, I didn't like it. I'm going to go back to my zone school. The same thing is true with magnet schools, right? There's a particular subject matter. I thought I loved aviation. I thought I loved mathematics. I thought I loved this subject matter. And I went to that school. That's what I went for. They have their quote-unquote major that they're doing, and they have different programs, and it just didn't work, and they decided to go back to their zone school. Sometimes it's out of necessity because it's closer for their job. There's a whole host of reasons, right? So I make that point only to clarify that there's also other hypotheticals where I was trying to capture that as well. And I agree with you that that if we tell a student, well, you can participate in JV sports, but if you tell any student that plays sports, playing varsity is kind of the dream, right? It's the purpose. It's really what feels like you're representing the school. So varsity, in my opinion, to tell a student you can't, it would be to the detriment of that child. And that's really where I draw the line. I understand the concern with recruiting and stacking. But we're so focused on that issue that we're consequently capturing all these other students who are just trying to play sports. And so I'm concerned about that.
Follow up if I may.
You may. I have a follow-up on probably on your follow-up as well. Do you want me to go ahead, or would you like to start?
Go ahead, because I'm changing topic here just a little
Okay, so I'm going to follow up because that section kind of jumped out at me as well. And so I went and asked legal, actually, if there were any other statutes where we kind of call out about retaliation, and there isn't. So that's why it does seem a little aggressive, I believe, in my opinion, and I think that's what my colleague was saying as well. I mean, it's a matter of First Amendment rights. So I think that kind of putting them on notice and saying that's not okay is sort of also our jobs, as you talked about, and saying this is not right. I'm not sure that it necessarily needs to be in statute. I just think that it comes off a little aggressive. I'm sure, and I don't know this for a fact, but I'm guessing it was probably one person who wrote that email. Or I don't know, but it just seems kind of a lot to change statute because of that when there's no other precedent for that.
Thank you, Madam Chair, for that question. Senator Edgar Flores, for the record. I mean, if you want to remove the retaliation language, that's fine. I think it would also be unprecedented for us not to listen to it. If it happened once, I'm concerned how many other times it's happened. And retaliation in this building, in general, I agree with you with the NIA that we don't have that language and we don't have it anywhere else. 100% agree with you. But in this building in general, it's usually one person raising their hand, really raising the alarm to an issue that immediately triggers us saying, well, wait a minute, we need to make sure that doesn't happen again, because typically, and I'm not saying that's true here, so this is me just speaking broadly in the legislative process. When we hear about retaliation, we often immediately what comes to mind is how many other folk have not raised concerns? How many other folk were also potentially threatened and or got a very forceful email or whatever and decided not to say anything? I think this only came to light because I was involved. Had I not been involved, those emails would have been sent. No one would have ever found out about it. We wouldn't have engaged in this conversation today. I wouldn't have put it in the NRS. I just happened to be in the middle of a conversation that immediately brought it to my attention, and I immediately took course because that's the job we have. You see an issue. If any one of you would have gotten a forceful email from anybody, from a lobbyist or from whomever, we feel empowered to speak up and to really push back on that. And I think it's part of what this legislative process does to us, that it allows us to say, well, wait a minute, that's not how this works. You're not going to talk to me like that. Every single one of you has kicked somebody out of your office who's crossed that line. But we're the minority in this state, that we have the authority to really step up and say, that's not how it's going to happen. I think the majority of folk operate through fear. They're scared of speaking up. They don't know how to take action. They don't know how to get involved in the legislative process. So that's why I'm doing it. But if the body is really concerned about it, and they don't think that it's an issue, I would work with the body if you wanted to amend that language. I can't imagine that the NIA would. I think the NIA's position on this, without speaking to them specifically about that, is just we're not going to retaliate ever. That's not what we do. That's not what our focal point is. We don't care about this. So that language is unnecessary, is probably what I think they would argue. And my only concern would be, well, I am concerned with how the messaging was framed around folk who were speaking to me, and that's why I did it. But I would work with the body. If the body wanted to amend that language, again, that wasn't where the bill started. The bill started with me keeping kids in school playing sports. And so I would work with you, Madam Chair. in
Senator,
whatever way.
we do have quite a few more questions, but, I do get concerned with, calling out a private company. I think the First Amendment takes care of that. For the record, I don't think I've ever thrown someone out of my office either. I just wanted to get that on the record. Okay. But you wanted to ask a follow-up. We do have several questions in another bill. So we'll ask your follow-up, and then I'm just reminding you, Torres, LaRue Hatch, Thomas, Angie Taylor, back to you, and then Hanson. So, and now we have Rubin and MacArthur. So, what did I say? I just called you Rubin. Sorry. Apologize. Sorry. I just called him by his first name. I apologize. So let's take off our lawyer hat and be as brief as we can with our no charging by the hour. By the word. Yeah. Okay. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. So, I'm passionate about this because I was on that board. Was I not getting my follow-up?
Yes, you were.
Oh, okay, someone looked at me funny, so. So just for the record, I'm definitely opposed to retaliation and to intimidation. I mean, that's not acceptable and that's not appropriate. One quick point, though, I believe there is and I was on 10 years ago, but I believe there is an appeal process. There's a hearing officer, and then it goes to the school districts to hear these things. So to say there's no appeal process that exists at this point, I believe there is, unless it's changed in the last 2 years, and I don't know if those guys can maybe verify that. So that's it. But I think the one thing you have done, and you say that there's protections on this, but I think what you've done is you've made every high school athlete in the state a free agent at this point. I mean, I represent the rurals, and every year, if we get a kid all-state, guess where he plays next year? He plays in Reno. He leaves Fallon and he goes and plays in Reno, and that's under the existing system. And they're not going to, whatever, but they'll have an excuse. He likes the aeronautic program at our school, and that's why he's coming. But you've made every single high school athlete in this state a free agent at this point. They can transfer one time, no repercussions, and I don't know that that's good for communities, and I don't know that's good for the state as far as athletics and compatibility. That's not the word. Competitiveness. Anyways, so thank you.
Madam Chair, I think that was more of a comment.
I was going to say, I don't think there was a
respect this
question.
position. I respect
Okay.
the position.
Let's move on.
Thank you, and thank you, Senator, for bringing forth this piece of legislation. Working in schools and talking to many coaches, I think it's unfortunate that there is like this level of discomfort approaching NIAA. So while I know some of my colleagues might feel concerned that we're putting this language regarding retaliation, I do believe that there have been several instances in which principals have seen retaliation, where there's been threats to athletic directors for different decisions and for bringing forth or talking to legislators about any type of action. I do remember, I believe it was last legislative cycle, that Assemblyman Roberts brought a bill that was that impacted the NIAA, and there was heavy opposition, and there was and there was retaliation, I think, to the parents too, that had brought the legislation. But I think this specifically addresses the schools and people, so that coaches should feel comfortable talking to us. So can you, I know you've talked on it a little bit, but can you add on and just talk a little bit more about like the genesis of this and who this will impact, or maybe other instances that this might impact our communities? Because I'm concerned because NIA, if I'm right, receives public funds, right? So it's not that they're a private company doing action. They're receiving public dollars, right? They're receiving our school, our students' funds. And so I don't think that there should be any instance of retaliation to our students that are, many times hoping to get a scholarship to go to school, right? And that really just want to get out and play.
I appreciate that, Assemblywoman Torres. I'm speaking into the future. Senator Edgar Flores, for the record. So, a couple things. I do have a few emails, and Madam Chair, what I'll do is I'll share stories from family members of Nevada, where they're just telling their story about their particular son or daughter who are an athlete and kind of the nightmare that they went through. I didn't realize how much of that I would get until I opened this. And that will, Assemblywoman, will give you some insight as to personal account stories from students in Nevada and families raising their concern. But when it comes to retaliation, and again, I really do believe it's because the NIA operates separately on their own. And very seldom are we, as a body, looking inward, that we don't exactly know the context of a lot of these concerns that have been brought forth. And it's frustrating to me that I even have to defend retaliation concerns, only because if somebody's bringing up a retaliation concern, that should be enough for us to, at a minimum, give some consideration to that. Nobody should be afraid of speaking to us, period. No student, no coach, no teacher, no admin, no human being should be concerned that if they speak up or bring up some issue, it's going to somehow lead to their son or daughter not participating in sports, them somehow going through some headache, or that the school will have a harder time, particularly with some of our charter schools. A lot of them don't have sports, and they're still getting to that. And those schools eventually are going to want to come in and participate. They're going to have their own soccer team, their own football team, their own XYZ team. They're in the infancy stages of getting there. And I am concerned that any one of those schools, and at any point, because they spoke to me and or have spoken to anybody else, would feel that they're now somehow going to be targeted. Particularly those schools, because I know that they're going to have to be in front of the NIA eventually saying, we're ready to have our own football team, or we're ready to have this team, or ready to have that team. And so that, I'm looking into the future with how that relationship's going to work and just laying the framework. And I don't think there's anything wrong with us as a legislative body to look at the NIA. I don't think there's anything wrong with us looking into what they're doing, listening to concerns, and saying, we gave them that authority. And when we think that there's concerns and that they're not being addressed, that we then take it upon ourselves to fix it.
Assemblywoman LaRouche.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for answering our questions today. There seems to be two distinct pieces to this bill, and so if I may, I do have two questions. Thank you. My first question is on the retaliation piece. I actually am questioning why it is just NIAA that is singled out. I, as a teacher in a school district, know for a fact there are educators that are retaliated against by their admin or by district officials for speaking either here or at school board meetings. There are, in your own ed committee yesterday, the Teachers and Leaders Council retaliated against teachers saying they can't testify in front of you because they didn't want it to go against their message, right? That's happening in multiple places. And so my question is why it's only this one area if that is a concern.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Senator Edgar Flores, for the record. It really is just because of the area of the law that we're working with, 385B. And so I stayed within the context and confines of that. However, if the question is, would I be open to expanding this conversation to other areas? Absolutely. Retaliation in any aspect is wrong, anywhere. Whether it's from a principal to their staffer, to their teacher, to their student, right? So I am open to doing that. It's just because I was in this chapter, I focused and stayed within it. That's the only reason.
Thank you for that. And my second question is about the recruitment, because I have gotten many constituent emails very concerned about that. And I know in Washoe County, there are probably 2 high schools where everyone's going to want to go play. And I think we've had similar concerns about recruitment. And so my question is just, you say, you know, that you're not allowed to recruit and you're not touching that. However, reputation alone is often enough, right? There are certain schools in my district where we know they always win. They have the strong programs. That's where people want to play. And so the coach doesn't have to say a word and people may want to transfer there. And so how are you preventing that issue?
Thank you, Assemblywoman. Senator Edgar Flores, for the record. That's true today. Let's assume that I eliminate this bill and we do nothing. We know that there's a couple of schools that are phenomenal when it comes to soccer. We know that there's a couple of schools that are phenomenal when it comes to basketball. We know there's a few that are phenomenal when it comes to football. That is true today. Any parent who, and most parents who have student athletes are passionate, and they know what schools are the good ones, right? So that remains true today. And there's nothing you or us can honestly do about that. If a student in 8th grade understands that this school just has the better soccer team, or that's where their friends are at, or has the better football team, or whatever it may be, that student may take an active role in trying to make their way into that school. That is true. But I just want to go back into what recruit is defined under NRS 385B.038. Recruit means to use undue influence upon or to provide or offer to provide an inducement to a prospective pupil by a principal, administrator, faculty member, coach, alumnus, or other person who is associated with the school to encourage or attempt to encourage the prospective pupil to attend or remain at the school for the purpose of participating in interscholastic activities, right? And then if you go further into that, it explains how you can't do that. So if that ever happens, and again, I'm not touching that, even with the one-time transfer, so if somebody goes to that student and says, I need you to come here, they're in violation. And that's always going to remain true. But I agree with you that it's going to be very difficult to know that somebody went to somebody's house, that somebody was speaking to a student one-on-one. I agree with you. That's very hard to do, but that's very hard to do now. And that's just the reality of it. And my focus is on how do we maximize the amount of students participating in playing sports, and that we don't penalize a student just because their parents moved, just because they're in a tough situation, or sometimes it's a better move, right? Maybe the parents got a better job, or they purchased a home for the first time. There's a whole host of reasons why a student has to move, and they're not in control of that. I don't want to hurt what they are in control of, which is them participating in sports, because they have to keep a certain GPA, a certain attendance level. A student sometimes will only work really hard in school because they care so passionately about whatever sport they're playing in. Sometimes it's multiple sports, right?
We do have another bill, but it really brief.
Really brief, just, so you're saying that this is already happening to some extent, right? People are moving because of programs, but wouldn't this open up the floodgates so that it happens way more? Would it not exacerbate the inequities between schools because now you don't have to physically move to go to this new school? Now you can just go there. So are you concerned about that piece of it?
And I appreciate that. Senator Edgar Flores, for the record, I guess the question that is being posed today is, if we allow for students to transfer, are we going to see a bunch of students transferring specifically for sports? And I'm not saying that might not happen. I'm not saying that there's not going to be hypotheticals, and some of you may say, look, specifically I know of a school X years in the past where that happened. So I don't want to minimize the fact that that's something that happens. What I'm saying is, does that concern, given that it's unlawful, recruiting is unlawful, NRS 385B.342, NRS 385B.344, all of that specifically delineates that it is prohibited conduct. The question that is being posed now is, do I think that concern outweighs students participating in sports after they transfer? And my answer is no. I think a student transferring from school A to school B is new to that school. And the easiest and fastest way for that child to make friends, to create community, to have a sense of belonging is sports. Sometimes a student will tell you, the only thing I care about in that school is sports. That's all I care about. And that the only reason I'm going to show up to math, I'm going to show up to reading and science is because of that sport. My opinion is that outweighs everything else, considering that it is already prohibited conduct, and that remains in place.
Assemblywoman Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Senator. You know, I'll make a comment first. It's the children. It's their education that counts. And if sports is that vehicle for their education, why not? And you didn't say it, but I do believe in school choice. And I say that from my own experience with my son, who was zoned for Palo Verde and knew he was going to go to that school. He tells me he would rather go to Cimarron because they have a better football team. And my question to him was, what are your grades like? How are you going to maintain? And then at this time, I don't know if schools still do it, but they had variances so he had to, every year, we had to apply for a school variance so that he could maintain Cimarron. And then my maintaining him was he better not fall to a C. A C gets him over to Palo. So he maintained an A and a B average while he was in high school. But again, that was school choice. Him and I sat down and talked about it, and he wanted to play football because he thought that Cimarron was the school, and at the time, Cimarron was the school. But when he attended Cimarron, Palo became the school. So, he didn't flip back to Palo. He maintained Cimarron. But again, that was something that a parent and a child sat down and talked about and had some barriers in place. Again, we have charter schools coming on, and I think that parents should be allowed in this day and age to decide what school their children should go to. And if it's a sports that they want to play, it should be allowed. We as state legislators and people that are in school, educators, should not be setting up parameters that say, no, you can only do this and you can only do that. So I think your bill is addressing that.
Madam Chair?
I hate to do this, but we are running up
And I was
against
gonna
the
say, I think
clock.
it was more of a comment.
Yeah, and I hate to do this to members. I know everybody has a question, but we're gonna actually lose the other senator to another committee in less. No, you don't leave yet. Don't leave yet. I was gonna let people ask a few questions, but we really need to like concise this up, if we would. What was the word? Okay, so did you want to go again? Okay, Assemblywoman Hanson, De Silva, MacArthur, you have a question, or was that a joke? Oh, okay. Okay, so you two, and then we're gonna move on to testimony. So
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's good to see you. Love the bill. Loved it when it was unanimous in the Senate, unanimous out of committee, heard on the 15th of February, work session, the latter part of April, voted on the floor, and now we hear all this disruption. I'm a little at a loss for that. But anyway, thank you for working with people, trying to make it more amenable. I guess one of the things that I'm trying to mull over in my mind is this retaliation idea. As a parent of 8 student athletes, yes, retaliation exists. As a legislator, retaliation exists. It's a human component that we will find everywhere. So in the defense of NIAA, or did I say it right? Yeah, NIAA, it's not just exclusive to them. It's here, it's everywhere. But yes, I do think one component of why I see maybe it's in this language is originally the bill started with charters schools. Charter schools exist really kind of with permission. It's a different entity than it is a regular public district school. So to me, I was concerned that maybe the reason we needed it in here is that if there's some issues with this or sports and charter schools, that the charter school doesn't have to worry about some sort of threat to their existence. And I don't know. I don't know that that's why this is here or being suggested, but to me, that's why the language seemed unique. And it's not been in statute before because we're dealing with charter schools doing something new, and that's getting into the sports world. So that's more of a statement. And I'm going to move on because I know we're short on time. So just for the record, love the bill. Thank you for working with people, and I'll be quiet now.
thank you, and Assemblyman De Silva.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Senator. It's always good to see my senator in the building. Just a few things I just want to point out over here. I very much agree with the sentiment of this bill. Just a couple numbers here. The average varsity soccer program, high school program, 18 players on a roster. Average basketball 15, average baseball 18, average volleyball roster is 16. So and again, speaking as a former multi-sport high school athlete, as a former as a coach, a high school girls basketball coach, I'll say that the issue with transfers and the creation of recruiting hubs, I think is a serious one. But the actual transferability hasn't been the issue. I think this will actually benefit students who are moving around. And we know that with our affordable housing crisis and the transiency of our actual school districts, that students move often and oftentimes want to participate in sports and want to participate in these programs, but can't because of the rules in place. I would say this, though. I think there may be other ways that coaches and schools circumvent the actual rules that are in place. And I want to see if you'd be open, Senator, to maybe incorporating a study into how clubs recruit and create those sort of avenues into the high school systems and really circumvent the entire recruiting sort of laws that we have placed in effect to prohibit that.
Thank you, Assemblyman De Silva. Senator Edgar Flores, for the record, I will say that Senator Hammond specifically has a bill that addresses the issue where a coach for a high school is forcing all their athletes to play in a particular club, or vice versa, that you're the coach for a club and you make them all play for a specific high school. And he's prohibiting that conduct because that's another way of that happening in any sport. So I think his bill is better suited for capturing that concern, because that's one of the ways that we've heard about recruiting or stacking of a team that they're using the club, the high school, the third-party club, right? Whether it be, if I'm always thinking soccer, but whatever sport it may be. But there is a bill out there that's really trying to focus and make it unlawful to do that.
Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, Senator, thank you so much. Just as a former Division I and high school level athlete, and athletics administrator, and a former member of the NIA board, this is a fascinating issue for me, right? As you bring forward, I mean, but in all of that, I know the value of participating in sports. I am in large part where I am today because I played sports all my life, and it got me through school. My primary concern in this is certainly the recruiting issue, as you've spoken of, and it creating the haves and the have-nots. Those students that can go to another school and have the transportation and do all of that, and versus those schools where you have children that don't have the ability to do that. And much like my colleague, Assemblyman Koenig said, those smaller schools generally, or those Title I schools that don't have as much, that then get taken away and go. So that's a large concern of mine in this. And so I'm wondering if in any of your, as you've done the work to put this together, if you've given that any kind of consideration, how's that mitigated?
Thank you, Vice Chair, for that question. Senator Edgar Flores, for the record, I agree with you that families who have financial means can more easily transfer, right? Because it means traveling a long distance. It means the adults having a flexible schedule to get the child there in the morning, to pick them up in the afternoon, because they're probably not on a regular bus. I agree with that 100%, and it would be wrong for me to pretend that that's not an issue. I still think that even a student who has parents who have the privilege of driving them every morning, who have a flexible schedule, I still believe that even that student, right, and they're not the students in my district, but even that student, in my mindset, when they transfer to another school, I want them to participate in sports. I truly believe that one of the hardest things that's happening right now is figuring out how to keep our students engaged. And one of the few things that I know through my personal friends who have their kids in school now, as somebody who played sports throughout high school, and I'm still really close friends with those folk, the only reason they were there is sports, honestly. They had no other reason to want to show up to class. And that's a kid with means, and that's a kid without means. And that's just the reality of that. So I really do believe that even that student deserves this bill. However, I do agree with you that disadvantaged students will be less likely to kind of participate in the stacking or recruiting process, because a coach may reach out to one of these students, right? If we're thinking of that hypothetical. And you might tell a student, like, that's impossible for me. I live in North Las Vegas. I can't get to XYZ location. I could never do that. And so I do believe that a student with better means is more possible to recruit that student. But again, that remains unlawful conduct. And I also make the argument that it's students from lower income areas that often move the most. Because, I remember there was a point in my stage of my life where it was hotel to apartment to hotel, right? And that's just the situation my family was going through at the time. So I would make the point that for lower income families, while it's not a stacking or recruiting scenario, it is our financial situation is making me now move across town because I'm going to live in a double-up home, or I'm moving, 3 miles east of where I'm at because that apartment is a little bit cheaper. So I do think that we're the more transient community, but I think that higher income families are the ones that will be able to utilize it more through that lens of what we're concerned about, which is recruiting and stacking.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. And with that, I'm going to have you sit back, and I will go ahead and open it up to support. If there is anyone here in Carson City or in Las Vegas, if you want to, and you're in support, please fill up those chairs. Not seeing anyone in Vegas, but I do see Mr. Lopez here in Carson City. Please go ahead.
Hello, Chair, members of the Assembly Education. My name is Gil Lopez with the Charter School Association of Nevada. We do want to thank the bill sponsor for bringing this bill forward and listen to his constituents about the concerns that they're having in their schools. We did provide full testimony. It's on Nellis. So with that, we do support SB 114. Thank you. And I also want to thank the stakeholders that took the time to meet this morning as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing anyone fill those chairs in Vegas, so BPS, we'll go to the phone lines. Is there anyone on the phone line in support?
Callers, if you would like to testify in support of SB 114, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to provide support testimony at this time.
Thank you. And with that, we will close support testimony and move on to opposition for SB 114. If you are there in opposition in Vegas, I see you coming up to chairs. Appreciate that. Please fill in the chairs here too. We'll start in Las Vegas though. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee members. My name is Matt Neiswanger. I'm a teacher and coach at Shadow Ridge High School. And I think it is really important that you hear from somebody on the ground level that this would really affect. I really can't express enough that this is a recruitment bill. I'm going to steal a line from an assemblyman who earlier, every student athlete will now be a free agent. Many of the hypotheticals that have been brought up today, those are already addressed. If a student transfers, they have to sit out varsity competition only. They're still allowed to participate in non-varsity level sports. If a student moves because of hardship, they're immediately eligible for all levels of the sport. We're chasing things that aren't issues with this. As an educator in a public school, part of what I'm doing is creating a local community. And recruiting is antithetical to that. This is a community wrecking ball. Students will be able to transfer from their community school anytime for any reason. This would benefit schools like mine, like Shadow Ridge, and create more inequities within our school system. Unfortunately, I've had a very successful program at Shadow Ridge. Some of these other schools that have higher turnover, they don't have a consistent program and or coach. It will be easier for those kind of students that excel at those schools to come to my school now and help fill out my roster, where instead of me having to use my community-based team and members, I can have team members from all over the valley. And to be honest, I don't think that's a good approach. I don't like that. Just because I could do that under this new bill, I don't think that's a good idea. And I would like you to know as well, these conversations are already happening. Coaches are talking around town. Okay, what do we need to do? These charter school coaches are talking. Okay, what are the students that we need to know about at Shadow Ridge or these other schools around town? Because they're going to be taking them. They'll be reaching out. They'll be recruiting. This is a bad bill. We don't need to upend our current system because of all these hypotheticals. We've addressed these issues already. Helping a few of these hypotheticals isn't a reason to pass this bill. Please don't destroy our communities. Please don't create more inequities within the system. Please say no to Senate Bill 114. Thank you very much.
Thank you. We'll stay in Las Vegas.
Hi, my name is Angela Pichota. I am a coach and teacher at Shadow Ridge High School as well. To me, this bill seems very biased. The waiting time, just like Coach Neiswanger already stated, is that it's already there. Players can already play sub-varsity. No one's prohibiting children from playing a sport. We would not do that. For me, this bill looks like a recruitment bill. I mean, that's what it is. It is to allow, it's with the revised wording, it's great that it's not just for charter schools, but it is definitely now just a blatant recruitment bill. And I know that the senator says that's not what it is, but it is what it is. That's exactly how it will be interpreted and how it will work. To me, sorry, I lost my place where I was reading. So having a waiting time in place does not eliminate students to play for their team or from competing. They still can be on those JV or B teams. Taking away, it's only, the only disadvantage this bill is to public schools. The way, so we already face competition for our students and and they're transferring to private schools we don't have funding that private schools have. This would allow them to have even more kids there. It's just a disadvantage for public school students. And I love that the senator before was speaking in behalf of that and how it seems to only disadvantage those kids who don't have the means to go to the school or a school that they would like to. They only have the means to go for transportation that's provided to them. Charter schools don't provide transportation, neither do private schools. And so it's just another way that we're disadvantaging public school students, especially those who are at Title I schools. That is basically all I had to say. I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas wishing to provide testimony? I don't believe so. So we'll come up here to Carson City.
Thank you, Chair Bilberry Axelrod, Vice Chair Taylor, and Assembly Education Committee members. I am Donnie Nelson, Executive Director of the Nevada Interscholastic Activities Association, the private nonprofit governing body of high school sports. It is amazing to think that high school sports has reached this level in prominence to be here in front of you. That's pretty amazing in itself. So, the passage of Senate Bill 114 would set a bad precedent for the NIA with regards to how our organization manages its affairs. Our member schools want to work together, from the 1A through the 5A classifications, from the rural through the metropolitan areas, to devise language that best suits the goals, missions, and objectives of education-based sports. Our schools, the NIA member schools, are the experts with regards to adding, amending, and/or deleting regulations governing our association. We have rules that work cohesively, but this bill would fragment some of those Nevada administrative codes. We have a rules-changing process in place already that works very well through our membership, through a regulations committee, through the Board of Control, and ultimately through the Legislative Council Bureau. SB 114 overlooks many of the philosophical and ethical standards that are conduct to which have been designed for the protection of our student athletes. The bill, as loosely written, makes the NIA fearful of acts of undue influence and also retaliation between member schools. Regarding Section 1, the NIA has code stipulating how investigations and/or potential disciplines against member schools may be administered. To infer the NIA's Legislative Commission, which is our board of our superintendents, or Board of Control, or our office staff would act out of malice, prejudice, or retaliation against any member school is very odd. All schools have protections with their membership so long as they don't repeatedly violate Nevada administrative codes. Section 1.3, number 4, allowing an appeal beyond the hearing officer, has no context at this point to how it would be funded, nor when and where such an appeal would take place. A third level appeal would not only slow down the process, but clearly, perhaps even more so, prohibit a student athlete from getting the opportunity to play. And another question that comes out of this is, does the State Board of Education even want jurisdiction over the NIAA? So I'll leave you with this, that the NIA membership values its ability to amend existing regulation and also to create new rules based on what our member schools want. That's what it's about, what our member schools want. And we must remember that participation in high school sports is a privilege. So with that, thank you.
Can you stay where you are for 1 second? I wanted to ask you a quick question, and then I'm seeing that somebody else does as well. Are you saying that in NAC you currently do not have an appeal process at all? Or is that correct?
That's incorrect. We do have an appeal process, yes. We have a hearing officer. It is spelled out in Nevada Administrative Code.
Okay. And could you just give me a 50,000-foot overview? Would you like to do that?
Yeah,
But why don't you stay here, because there was one more question for you. Can you give me that really quickly?
yeah, Madam Chairman, Vice Chairman Taylor, my name is Paul Anderson. I am the attorney for the NIAA. I'm with the Maupin Cox and LaGoy law firm in Reno. I've represented the NIAA for 26 years. I wanted to address that specific issue because when Senator Flores indicated there is no appeal process, that's absolutely wrong. There's a two-step appeal process that a student follows. They follow it at their own school initially when they register for athletics. If there's any questions concerning their eligibility, the athletic administration at the high school makes the initial ruling as to whether they're eligible or not. if they are determined not eligible, they have the ability to apply for what we call a level 2 appeal. This is all in NAC 385B, beginning around the .900 statutes. So there's a process in place. Our hearing officer is a former, is a lawyer who formerly represented Bishop Gorman High School, who I battled with for years over recruiting issues. So our hearing officer is a parent-oriented attorney who often rules against the NIAA with respect to our appeals. So to add a third level of appeal, and I want to be clear also, when a student appeals, a high school season is not nearly as long as a college season. You might have up to 12 weeks, but the initial process and then the level 2 process can take up to 30 to 40 days. Adding a third level of appeal that's 30 days long basically is going to take that student completely out of their season. So I think the committee needs to understand that.
And I just was curious if you could give me a ballpark on how many students appeal on a yearly basis?
Madam Chairman, Paul Anderson, for the record, I just gave a talk on this at the NFHS back in Indianapolis. They're basically the NCAA of high school athletics. We meet once a year, and we met a week and a half ago back there, all the lawyers for the various high schools. I brought up the point that in this last year, we have seen over 20 appeals, and that's from July 1st of this year through the end of March. Typically, in past years, we've seen 5 or 6 level 2 appeals. That's what I'm talking about, not the initial appeal when a student is at their own high school, initially seeking eligibility, but those that are declared ineligible and actually take it to level 2. We've seen up to 20 this year, which is a significant increase.
And I am curious, someone on the committee did ask me to ask you, obviously you guys are in opposition of this bill, but I don't believe you testified in opposition on the Senate side, is that correct? Or were you not here?
I'm not sure if I testified or not. I thought that I had. Perhaps I did not.
I'm looking at the senator. Yes, no, maybe so? They were not, they were not here, or they did not? Okay. We only have 120 days, so we try to get all our work in. But so, obviously, the sooner you can get, to the table, we can work on this and not have to, do as much when we only have a few days left. Okay. I guess, did you want to now testify? I'm sorry, you jumped in, and were there any other questions from the committee? Did you? Sure.
Thank you, and I'll make it really quick. Has there been any sort of internal discussions about utilizing something similar to this with NIAA as opposed to making it a state law? If you're okay with that. Thank you, Chair.
Madam Chair, Paul Anderson again, to respond to that question, yes, there have been. There's discussions right now with respect to our regulatory committee about a one-time transfer rule. There have been surveys that have been circulated. This is not a unique situation to the state of Nevada. This is something that goes on throughout the country. And there's never been a solution that's a one-size-fits-all for anybody. So it's an ongoing thing. But I do want to add, and there was testimony earlier, I believe, out from Mr. Neiswanger in Las Vegas. One of the ways in which the NIAA has proactively addressed the recruiting issue and allowed for transfers was with our sub-varsity eligibility rule. And so what that provides is if a student transfers and they're anything other than a senior, they have the ability to participate at the sub-varsity level. So they get a one-time transfer in that respect. And the reason for that was to slow down the recruiting process, but facilitate the ability of a student to change a school if they chose to do so. The only proviso was they would have to wait for 1 year.
Thank you. And the issue of retaliation has come up many times, and so I hope that you will take this back to organization. And it's a First Amendment issue. You know, people are allowed to talk to their legislators and talk to, that's, you know, and sometimes it's just, you know, one bad apple that spoils the bunch. But I do think that that needs to be addressed, and a lot of organizations. So I just make sure that it's on the record. Okay, so we will move on. We have three. Oh, you have more comments. Sorry, I apologize.
I just had one point that I really wanted to address, and again, this goes to the recruiting process. It's actually 2 points, but I'll make it quick. If you look at subsection 3, dealing with the recruiting part that was not eliminated earlier today by Senator Flores, he says that's got nothing, that recruiting would still be prohibited, but as this is written, it begins notwithstanding any provision of law to the contrary. So we have laws and we have regulations in place that prevent recruiting, but this is eliminating us from being able to prohibit that. So I think that language would certainly need to be addressed. Also, and I think something that's very important to keep in mind, the anti-recruiting statutes and regulations that we've had in place and our transfer rules, one of the biggest issues that they protect, and everybody's discussed the fact that we're in this for children, as the NIAA is, the idea is to protect the student who is at the school because that's where they're zoned. That's where they've come up through the system with their friends, and now you have 3 or 4 kids coming in who's taken, this might be the 12th kid on the 12-man basketball team who all he's ever wanted to be is on the team, and now his place is being taken. So you got to take into consideration there are other concerns that we're trying to protect here too. And, you know, we're not always the big bad wolf trying to prevent somebody else who's trying to just transfer to schools so that they can have a better team or play for a better coach.
Thank you. We appreciate it. It's always nuanced, right? The devil is always in the detail, and we understand that what the purpose is of these organizations and why these parameters and rules were set out. And it's unfortunately our job to walk that fine line and figure out what's best for the state. So thank you very much. We're going to move on to the phone lines. I believe we have a few callers in opposition.
Callers, if you would like to testify in opposition to SB 114, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to provide opposition testimony at this time.
Okay, then we will close opposition and move it to neutral. Is there anyone here in Carson City or in Las Vegas in the neutral position? Not seeing anyone come up. Do we have anybody on the phone now that wishes to provide neutral testimony?
Callers, if you would like to testify in neutral for SB 114, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to provide neutral testimony at this time.
Thank you. And with that, we will close neutral and ask the senator if he would like to make some closing remarks.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Edgar Flores for the record. I just wanted to make a couple points of clarification. And honestly, it's my fault because I don't think I was clear, particularly when it comes to the appeals process. Presently, 100% true. There is an appeal process under NAC 385B.910. And if I could just very briefly read that to you. A pupil who is adversely affected by a determination pursuant to XYZ, doesn't matter. This is what matters. An appeal filed pursuant to this section must be heard by a hearing officer who is appointed by the executive director and approved by the board. When I say I want an appeals process, I mean I want an appeals process to the NIAA. I am not suggesting that the NIAA doesn't have an internal appeals process. But what if the NIAA is the problem? If they're appointing who's hearing XYZ, and it is an internal system, what I am saying is there needs to be something above the NIAA. Now, I respect that the NIA works really hard, and they do a lot of work. I am not suggesting that they don't care about student athletes. I am not suggesting that they are out there trying to attack teachers. What I am saying, in a scenario where something happens, where the NIA is a problem, I want to make sure that we as a body put somebody above them. And I get it. Nobody likes that. The NIA is not going to come up here and say, we want somebody to go above us, because they work really hard. The assemblyman has talked about, our vice chair has talked about the amount of work that's done in there. So for them to suggest and say we're not doing the best we can, it is flawed, right? I believe that they really are working really hard. I really do believe that they're doing work that is necessary and that it is a balancing act. It's not easy. However, I am also simultaneously saying that we gave them the authority to do this. And I want to create an oversight. And that is what I am asking that this body do. That we create a process so that when the NIAA is in question specifically, that they are no longer some entity that is untouchable. That we are just here, everything we're doing is perfect. That they realize they make mistakes, and it's fine. We have oversight of ourselves. That is good policy. That nothing stands alone by itself, and that we suggest and act that no mistake could ever be made, that there should be a process and some type of oversight over that. That is what I am asking that this body take into consideration now. That we have a process, and by the way, and our legal counsel here can address it, there are other scenarios where the appeals go to the state board. That's the fix. That when there's questions, and it's not specifically involving the NIA, but there are other areas where that is the recourse. You appeal to the state board. So that is how we came up with that language, and we put it there. And I believe that having oversight is fine. I am also appreciative of what was stated on the record on whether or not we are circumventing or somehow accidentally keeping out the language involving recruitment. I am more than comfortable in grabbing all the recruitment language and plugging it right in there, right underneath. And that way, if there's any questions, here's what recruitment, and just recruit as defined presently in the NAC. We'll throw it in there. And then the recruitment statutes, throw them in there. The NAC on recruitment, throw it in there and put it in the NRS to alleviate some of those concerns, because I am equally as concerned about that. And I would easily put that language in there if that's what this body wishes to do. I am 100% on board with doing that. And with that, Madam Chair, I do appreciate everybody's time. I know we overextended our welcome, but I do appreciate an opportunity to fully vet this issue. And I appreciate all the parents and everybody who's been involved in this conversation.
Thank you, Senator. You did not overstay your welcome. We're just at that time of year where it's boom, boom, boom. So with that, I will close the hearing on SB 114, and I will now open the hearing on Senate Bill 292. This bill revises provisions relating to school administrators. To present this bill, we have Senator Pizzina. Welcome to Assembly Committee on Education. And I believe you have some co-presenters from CCEA that I'll allow you to introduce.
Thank you so much, Chair Bilbray Axelrod, Vice Chair Taylor, and the members of the Assembly Education Committee. For the record, my name is Julie Pizzina, representing the very beautiful Senate District 12 in Clark County, and I'm here to present today Senate Bill 292, which provides greater accountability for administrators. And I'll introduce the co-presenters in just a moment, but I wanted to provide some background information. There are extensive accountability measures that are placed on teachers. If teachers do not meet those expectations, and I certainly don't need to tell anyone on this committee, there are consequences. And this bill is trying to ensure that the same is true for principals, especially given the research on the level of impact that a principal has on student achievement and teacher outcomes. According to a 2021 research report by the Wallace Foundation, I'd be happy to provide that information to the committee, when looking at a principal's impact on student achievement, quote, replacing a below average principal with an above average one would increase the typical student's learning by nearly 3 months in both math and reading, end quote, each year. The research suggests the need for strategies that cultivate, select, prepare, and support a high-quality principal workforce. And again, we continue to focus on creating a high-quality and prepared teacher workforce. So the question I would ask those of you on the committee is the same not true then for those that are in leadership positions. Additionally, the Wallace Foundation research cites recent studies that link more effective principles to key student outcomes, such as a reduction in absenteeism and exclusionary discipline. However, the impact of a principal goes beyond just student achievement. According to the report, research also shows clear links between effective leadership and important teacher outcomes, including more positive teacher working conditions and reduced turnover, especially among effective teachers. These conclusions alone highlight the need for policy efforts that strengthen principal leadership in our schools, and the real purpose of 292 is to recognize that the level of school climate and outcomes expected by this legislature of Nevada schools is a responsibility of the leader of a school, and principals need to be held accountable if these school measures are causing teacher turnover or poor performance. I had the opportunity when I was running for office to go into schools. And again, I respect so much the educators that are serving here in the legislature and on this committee. And speaking with some of the educators in schools about some of the challenges they had with principals was really what led me to carry this bill. While in the Senate, we did add an amendment where we had the opportunity, because we're really looking at climate, to have area superintendents, after 1 year of challenge, mentor those principals to try to improve outcomes. And we're also having a stakeholder meeting next week with many of the people that reached out during our Senate education hearing and after the work session, and we're getting something scheduled to meet with them on Wednesday with all stakeholders so we can look at further amendments. And when we have those, we will provide them to the chair and the committee manager, but we certainly never want to piecemeal anything one by one, so those will all come together to the committee. At this time, I would like to hand it over to fellow presenters, Francesca Petrucci, Marie Nisis, and we also have in Las Vegas a teacher, Stephanie Swain, that will also be presenting. And I just thank you again so much for the opportunity to be here before you today. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Francesca Petrucci for the record. I'm going to walk through some of the technical components of the bill. I would like to remind folks that this was on statute from 2015 to 2019. So Section 2, during the first 3 years of his or her employment by a school district in the position of principal, a principal is employed at will in that position. A principal who is reassigned pursuant to this subsection is entitled to a written statement of the reason for reassignment. If the principal was previously employed by the school district in another position and is reassigned pursuant to this section, the principal is entitled to be assigned to his or her former position at the rate of compensation provided for that position. Subsection 2, a principal who completes the probationary period set forth in NRS 391.820 by a principal is again employed at will if in each of 2 consecutive school years, both the rating of a school to which the principal is assigned as determined by the department pursuant to the statewide system of accountability for public schools is reduced by 1 or 2 levels, and 50% or more of the teachers assigned to the school request a transfer to another school. Subsection 3, if the events described in paragraphs A and B of subsection 2 occur with respect to a school year for any school year, this is what the senator was referring to when speaking about the amendment from the Senate Education Committee. The school associate superintendent or other administrator of the school district who oversees the school must provide mentoring to the principal of the school. And the school district shall conduct a survey of the teachers assigned to the school to evaluate conditions at the school and the reasons given by teachers who requested a transfer to another school. The results of the survey do not affect the employment status of the principal of the school. And 4, a principal described in subsection 2 is subject to immediate dismissal by the Board of Trustees of the school district on recommendation of the superintendent and is entitled on dismissal to a written statement for the reasons for dismissal. And the rest of the bill makes conforming changes based on the changes previously stated. And before I hand it off to Marie, I want to really kind of give some context, right, for why this is so important in this moment. As we sit here in this hearing, Silvestri Junior High School down in Las Vegas, we're in our 3rd year of dealing with an issue related to school climate that is the result of an ineffective principal. CCA has a process, and we can, talk more about that, but we surveyed that school in the 2020-2021 school year. It was determined that the principal was the cause of serious school climate issues. We resurveyed the school in the 2021-22 school year. No changes had been made from the previous school year. We're now at the end of the 2022-23 school year, and we're still dealing with the same problem. And this is a school that the intention was there of the district. There was an area superintendent who was there and willing to provide support. But the support, because I believe that administrator had been transitioned out, that area superintendent, was never realized. And so we're in the third year of a serious school climate issue. And you're gonna hear more from other schools. We have an educator from Bunker Elementary as well, but I wanna give that extra context as well. And with that, I'll hand it over to CCA President Marie Nisis.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. For the record, my name is Marie Nisis, and I'm the president of the Clark County Education Association. During my 30 years working for CCSD, I've taught at only Title I schools with our most at-risk students. I taught at 3 different schools and had 5 different administrators. 4 out of those 5 administrators I would, in a heartbeat, work for again. They each came into the school and wanting to be a change agent. They each had their own vision and expectations for the staff. They created a culture that was supportive and, more importantly, collaborative. After sharing their vision with the staff, they asked for input from the staff. What worked in the past, what didn't. We all worked diligently to make sure we brought that principal's vision to fruition. The other principal that I worked for also shared her vision with the staff. However, the delivery was very different. On day 1, she shared her expectations, she shared her vision, and she said at the end of that presentation, and if you don't like it, there's the door. This was a school that I helped open with my first administrator. I followed him to this school. I drove more than 20 miles to the east side of school. I believed in what he was creating for that school. I loved the community. That school was more than 20 miles away from my home, and I thought I would retire from that school. So I put away her negative comment, and I thought, I'm going to do everything I can, and so did my colleagues, to help bring her vision to fruition. But sadly, shortly thereafter, we realized we were working in a hostile work environment. I would walk around the building and see some of my colleagues in their classroom crying. Teachers would come to me and say to me, I feel like I'm walking on eggshells. So sadly, after 12 years, I, along with the majority of the staff, decided to transfer schools. When I went to her in tears because I had helped open that school, I gave up my summer to prepare teachers' classrooms, to push boxes and unpack boxes for my colleagues that were going to be coming into that building. And she said, that's okay. I only want first-year teachers because I want to mold them to do what I want them to do. Well, after multiple years of her hiring her own staff, the revolving door of educators continued. It broke my heart because I knew that community. I knew those students needed the top and the most effective teachers in those buildings. So the CCSD solution at that time was to transfer that principal to another school that was just a few blocks down the road. Sadly, that vicious cycle continued, and it continued until shortly thereafter she retired. We have some great administrators in CCSD who are doing great things. As the president, I have the honor to go to all the schools and meet with educators, and I see it firsthand. I hear the things that they're doing. But we need to make sure we are addressing these outliers. As my colleague Francesca said, this is currently happening as we speak. Just on Friday, I visited Bunker Elementary School because over half of the staff are leaving. And I'm not saying just educators, support professionals and the assistant principal as well. So I wanted to hear directly from them because my situation was many years ago. And yet here we are in 2023 and it is still occurring. Our students cannot afford a revolving door of educators because it impacts their outcomes. I know when I was in a school, I used to have my student siblings, because I built that community with the families. They would request me for a teacher. So when I transferred from that school, the families that I had served for multiple years were heartbroken. So we need to address this issue. Senate Bill 292 is not meant to be punitive. It's to address these issues. It's to flag concerns that come up like this. And we're not talking about, and let me be clear, we're not talking about educators who might be disgruntled, who may not believe in the principal's vision. We're talking about a hostile work environment that is created throughout the entire school, and that happens year after year. So, like I said, SB 292 flags that problem and then looks at solutions for that problem to address it. We want the most effective leaders in our building. Why, as a teacher, am I held to a different level of accountability. Shouldn't the highest level of accountability be starting with our building administrator? Because they set the tone for the school. So SB 292 has a high threshold. If 50% or more of your staff, again, that is a very high threshold, transfer out of your school, and we see a drop in academics as assessed by NDE, then it triggers that the associate superintendent should come in and provide mentorship. Just like mentorship is provided for our educators when they are struggling, whether it's additional resources or support, we expect that for our principals as well. Because at the end of the day, we need great leaders. And let me be clear, I've heard it said that this will deter principals from going to schools. The schools that I went to were tough schools. Those administrators, the 4 administrators, were not afraid to go there. They knew it was a lot of work. So if I heard in a previous hearing over a different bill, one teacher can damage or ruin a school climate, you're talking about one teacher and that being the issue from the lobbyist that represents principals, then how is that not also applied to the building leader of that school who will impact thousands of students and hundreds of educators as they go through that cycle? So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Stephanie Swain in Las Vegas. Thank you.
Good afternoon, committee chair and members. For the record, my name is Stephanie Swain. I currently teach at Berkeley Bunker Elementary, and I'm a CCAA member. I am proud to be presenting on Senate Bill 292. Nearly 82% of the educators with daily student interactions are leaving Bunker Elementary, and over half of our returning students won't see the friendly teacher faces they've come to know. It is heartbreaking to know the Bunker family of educators, students, and parents has been broken apart. This upending of student learning did not have to happen. The disruption in the emotional stability of our students was entirely avoidable, and we need to stop ignoring the causes that have made this type of turnover in schools routine. Ours was a domino effect that was predicted, voiced, and ignored. Educators aren't leaving because we don't want to follow new rules. We all stayed knowing new leadership was coming in. The problem was that we were given a leader who is insular. Contributions from highly qualified, experienced educators will be belittled and ignored. They were replaced with short-sighted decisions based on spreadsheets and control, not real people and not the kids. Leaders bring people up. Where is this more important than in our school leadership? We all stayed at Bunker knowing that change was coming. The problem was that we were kept in the dark and excluded from creating the future of the Bunker community. Who is accountable for teacher retention at this school level? Steve Jobs has said it doesn't make sense to hire smart people and then tell them what to do. We are educators with national board certifications, multiple master's degrees, expertise in areas that benefited our students. We were a team who worked together to achieve governor-designated STEM status for our school, and colleagues who sought to become some of the first educators in the state to be STEM certified teachers. We work hard for our students. This is about them after all. That a leader would disregard input from those who know students best is not leadership at all. Teachers are not lazy. We do not shy from responsibility or accountability. Bunker had what schools strive to build and maintain: connection, family, expertise, stability, and community. Now we're broken. Bunker's story is not a theoretical what if. It is happening in real time, and it exemplifies an ongoing situation within our district and state. We have an opportunity to take a step in the right direction. The quality of new leadership matters. Senate Bill 292 offers a way to know when administrators need additional support. We need to hold our administrators accountable because our students deserve to return to schools where they know their teachers. Parents deserve to know the teacher their child will learn and grow with. Bunker will take generations to rebuild. It is not a simplistic task, and it will not happen within an administrative bubble. Tier 1 Title I schools don't just rebound from disruptions like this. If there's anything we as a collective society can agree to care about, it is educating our kids, especially those who are underrepresented. Senate Bill 292 can help ensure other school communities don't suffer like Bunker's has. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Any other testimony, or are you open for questions?
Thank you so much, Chair. With that, we are open for questions. I would like to share with the committee, this is so important to me, and I apologize. I chair a committee at 3:30 and will not have my vice chair today. So in order, because of the joint session, to keep us moving in a timely manner for our staff, I will have to leave right before 3:30. And please know it's not because I don't care greatly about this bill or spending time with you. I just have to go, Chair.
We
Thank you.
100% understand, and we were trying to move along your colleague, but he just kept talking and talking. Just kidding. I'm teasing. We do have a question from Assemblywoman Thomas, and then we will go to you, Assemblyman Koenig.
Thank you so much, and thank you, Chair, again, and thank you, Senator, for this presenting this bill. But I must say, I stand all amazed, especially with CCEA coming in and saying that the schools right now, because of the principals, the administrators, are not doing an adequate job to secure safety in their schools, teacher retention in their schools. And just a few weeks ago, we heard that the reason why teachers were leaving by the thousands was because of our students misbehaving. And this is why I'm amazed that when I stated that the responsibility of a school's safety had to be at the head of the school, who principals who knew their school environment, I was told that that wasn't true. It was because of these misbehaving students was the reason why teachers were leaving by the thousands. So my question here is, because I'm standing all amazed, please give me an answer. Who is responsible for the school environment? Is it the teachers? Is it the students? Or is it the head of the school, the principal? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Assemblywoman Julie Pizzina, for the record. And this is my opinion, and I'm not an educator, so I will pass it over to those that are. But from what I've heard from those I've spoken with, it lies in a number of different places. This bill addresses climate from an administration standpoint, because I took this forward because I had so many conversations with educators who came to me when I came to visit them and wanted to share their personal stories one-on-one. So from those perspectives, I wanted to bring this bill. That said, we know that there are many phenomenal educators and phenomenal administrators out there. Mr. Horn, I believe, is in the room right now, and I've heard wonderful things about the work that he did at Green Valley High School. Unfortunately, that's not true of every administrator, and I think the fault lies with a number of different parties. That said, administrators are one of those, by no means the sole cause. And looking, I'm sure, at all of the different bills that are coming forward, there are a number of different solutions, and there's no one bill that can solve everything, but we're hoping that this bill will make a stand and help a number of educators, including some of the ones that I spoke to personally. Again, though, I'm not an educator, and I wouldn't presume to stand for those who are, so I will pass it over to someone who can probably answer that question better, and thank you for the question.
Thank you, Assemblywoman Marie Nices, for the record. So clearly, what we've heard from a multitude of educators, we have a multitude of bills this session that address the crisis that it is to become a teacher. There is a pipeline issue. One of the issues, yes, you are speaking to a different bill, that you are correct. At certain schools, in certain situations, the behavior has reached a level that needs additional assistance, that needs to be looked at. And we've even heard from administrators when it comes to that bill. My hands are tied. There is nothing more I can do. This bill speaks to a select number of schools where we are talking about a culture and climate that is toxic. We're not saying that every school is like that, because thank goodness it isn't. There are schools that are doing great things with great leaderships. Educators leave the profession for a number of reasons, and we've all heard it. It's been in the news, whether it's behavior, whether it's pay, whether it's the conditions that are in a particular school based on that building leader. So this bill speaks to that. So the climate and culture that can be negative, and cause me to leave a school that I wanted to retire from and go to a different Title I school. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Just to follow up on that, so when you're saying now that you want the legislators to enact a bill that will basically take principals that are not doing a good job or doing their job, and you want us to now say to CCSD, all right, these legislators are ineffective, all right? My question is, again, why are we overreaching? Why aren't you asking CCEA, asking CCSD to do their job, to make sure that their principals are doing the job? I mean, they have area superintendents, they have superintendents. I mean, there's a big chain. So I just don't understand why is, this government overreach you're asking us to do.
Francesca Petrucci for the record. That's a great question, and I want to walk you through, because this is an experience that we've had year after year after year. And so in the example I gave about Silvestri Junior High School, it's been 3 years where, to your point, we have surveyed the school, we have gone back to the district, we have tried to incorporate central administration to fix this issue, and we're on year 3. To give you some background on this, because the culture and climate issues have risen to a level that warrants extra support, which I think is what you're alluding to, CCA has a process. What is the process? The Decker survey is essentially one where we get notified by educators of a certain building that there's a toxic work environment, educators don't feel supported, and I think it's something that CCA needs to look into. And we've been working with this survey for about the last 4 years, and we've done a total of 31 Decker surveys. 31. 22 out of the 31, it was determined that there were culture and climate issues at the school. The next step of the process is, to your point, we go to the district and we say, there's a problem here, and we have information about what the issue is, specifically what the issue is, and how to triage these issues from a central level. But we haven't gotten that support. And so the amendment, which was worked on by the Senate Ed Committee and Chair Lang, which is very helpful, is that mentoring component. It's a requirement, to your point, that CCSD come in and try to triage the situation, after it's identified.
Assemblyman Koenig.
So, thank you, Chair. Thank you for bringing this bill forward. My question has to do with the statewide system of accountability. At this point, are we using the STAR system? Is that what we're using?
Francesca Petrucci for the record. We are not the regulatory body, that determines what that is, so we'll defer to ND on what that would be. Francesca Petrucci for the record. When it was currently under statute, the STAR rating was what was in place. But again, we're not, the regulatory agency to determine what that is.
So the quick follow-up, my point here would be then, so to fall under this category, you would have to have your level reduced by 1 or more levels, 2 consecutive years. If I start in a STAR school, a 2-star school, the first year I drop down to a 1-star school. The second year, I can't drop to a 0-star school. That doesn't exist. So if I start at a 2 or a 1, even if I kill the I would say atmosphere, that's not right, but of my school, I wouldn't qualify under this because I didn't drop 2 consecutive years a level.
Thank you so much, Assemblyman Julie Pizzina, for the record. So what would need to happen in addition to that is, so it's both the rating and over 50% of your staff. And also, it would be putting into statute that the area superintendent would help after the first year. And so the hope is that there would be no further star rating loss, there would be no more turnover in staff, and that they would be able to triage the issues. So this is almost a nuclear option, saying you need to drop a star level each of 2 years, and you need to lose 50% of your staff each of 2 years to go back to at will. And thank you for the question.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Hanson. We'll go to Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for bringing forward the language. I have two questions. The first has to do with on page 2, lines 24 through 27, which I believe is section 2.4, and that has to do with the automatic dismissal. Would that be something that is negotiated, or would that be something that's part of a collective bargaining agreement, or is that automatically something that could happen based upon recommendations from the superintendent?
Thank you so much for the question, Julie Pizzina, for the record. And I really just wanted to say goodbye because I have to head down to committee, and then my colleagues will answer the question. But thank you again so much for having me. I meant to mention, and I forgot during the background introduction as well, that this was bipartisan legislation in the Senate and did pass 21-0, and that we're very committed to working on amendments. Thank you.
Francesca Petrucci for the record. Thank you for the question. It says that, yeah, the principal, if they meet this threshold, right, which again, I really want to remind members of the committee, we're talking about 2 consecutive years of over 50% turnover and a decline in student performance, then yes, the superintendent may recommend dismissal to the Board of Trustees. However, the Board of Trustees have the authority to do that. Same with educators do it. So the responsibility lies on the Board of Trustees.
Thank you. And can I have a follow-up? Thank you. So, thank you. And that's what I thought, but I just wanted to make sure that I had that accurate in my mind. So then my other question, it was mentioned during the presentation, but I don't see it in here. Is there any sort of expectation for mentoring, and or after that first year, if a principal were to be in that position, is there an expectation of mentoring, or is that more of an internal discussion between the collective bargaining agreement?
Francesca Petrucci for the record. So the intent of that language is to provide specific mentoring depending on the situation, right? We know, over 350 schools, at least in Clark alone and more across the state, there's not going to be a one-size-fits-all for what that looks like. So we wanted to make sure that at least there were some supports in place for that, principal in, a school that is experiencing this level of reduction in student performance and staff turnover.
Thank you. Next, we'll go to Assemblywoman Hardy.
Thank you, Chair. I was quite sad to hear that one of the schools you're talking about was Sylvester Junior High School. Both my daughters went there, and so it was a great school. And so that was kind of made me feel bad that that's one of the schools that's having a problem. I believe you mentioned in your testimony that it was in statute from 2015 to 2019. If you could just elaborate on that, and then why it was changed, and do you believe that was helpful when we had that statute? That's the first question. And then in the case of like a principal that ultimately it's decided that they need to not be at that school, or et cetera, I mean, would they just be what you said, transferred to another school, or like what happens? Like, because that's, a concern. They didn't thrive in a particular school. Now we just move them somewhere else. And that you risk that it happens over again. Maybe some people just aren't meant to be a principal. So if you could talk about those two things. Thank you.
Yeah, great questions. Francesca Petrucci for the record. So to your first question, it was put into statute in 2015. It was repealed in 2019. It was SB 153. I don't think there was any sort of real intention around the repeal. It was in sort of an omnibus bill that had a lot of really great things in it. We saw, though, that in the year that it was repealed, I believe it was 17 schools had culture and climate issues. And again, speaking about the Decker process where we had been notified that there were issues. And so, you know, again, the language that was in statute, it sort of functioned as a deterrent, right, with a high threshold, you know, to meet. But it was a deterrent. And then, you know, obviously it was appealed in 2019. And then to your second question, you know, the district, about the placement of certain administrators. I mean, that's part of what this process tries to sort of weed out is the administrator maybe not fit for the specific place, or is there, you know, has there been, you know, such a rise in poor culture and climate problems that they may not be fit, as you were saying, to be in this role. And that's why the threshold, again, is so high. And so, but ultimately the district is responsible for placing those those principals.
Thank you for those those answers. So then, just again back to say, you know, Bunker Elementary and then Silvestri. So you mentioned specifically Silvestri. That's been like 3 years. There's nothing like I'm just not clear why that person's still there. Is there nothing that can be done currently without this, with this statute being passed?
Francesca Petrucci, for the record, yeah, I mean, what's happening at Silvestri is a travesty, unfortunately not, you know, an isolated incident. And part of the mandate in this bill to provide some sort of mentorship, you know, after, you know, a series of issues happening at a school is there is a mandate there, because to your point and to the 22 schools out of the 31 that we've done Decker surveys in, there hasn't been the support there to really remedy the situation. In Silvestri's specific example, there was an intent. There was an intent actually by the area superintendent, but I believe that area superintendent had moved on, and so then the school was sort of left without any leadership, so we keep surveying the school and no improvements had been made. Part of the intent of this legislation is to have the requirement that there needs to be ongoing support.
Thank you. Next, we will go to Assemblywoman Mosca.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for this. So my two questions are going to come from mainly my experience as both a teacher and then working in central office and really seeing this on the ground. And so my first question is, with these two stipulations, do we have any schools that match this criteria right now?
Over the last 5 years, 8 schools would qualify for the first phase, for the mentorship portion of it. And again, that's the intent behind this is never to have a school meet this threshold. It's again to function as a deterrent, which it did for 4 years while it was in statute.
Thank you. And then so my second question really is again, as someone who's seen it on the ground, is I know that the area superintendents are in charge of the principals, and that I've seen too where if a principal should not be in their role, they go back to central office versus going to a school. And so I think for me, for this one, it is just really trying to understand what are the steps that are missing right now currently that is enabling us to go here? As in, can you share more, what does the district, and we know this is state level policy as well, what are districts, in your view, not doing that we're trying to go then to this? Which to me seems extreme, but trying to understand what is the problem in the middle we're trying to solve.
Marie Nices, for the record, from the lens of a teacher, they're not addressing the change that is needed, whether that building principal needs additional supports before they become a principal, maybe put them back into a system that allows them to be more successful. That's what's missing. And let me be clear, there is not a shortage of administrators. There are plenty of administrators waiting. Even at these most at-risk schools, this will not be a deterrent because there is a huge pool of people waiting to become building principals. So for me, it needs to be support systems that are put in place, because at the end of the day, this isn't meant to be punitive. We aren't asking for someone to lose their job. We're asking for supports to be put in place to make them be successful, just like we expect that for teachers. But at the end of the day, I don't want a teacher in front of my grandchildren who isn't effective. If it's not a profession for them, if the principal has given the teacher those support systems and they're not effective and it's not the profession for them, none of us who are teachers want to work with someone like that. It should be the same for principals. Because again, why am I, as a classroom teacher, being held to a much higher standard than the building principal that sets the tone for the entire building? Thank you.
Next, we will go to Assemblywoman LaRue Hatch.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for speaking to this issue. President Isis, I was having flashbacks when you were describing that school because I went through the exact, almost beat for beat situation. I taught at a Title I high school. I thought I was going to retire from there. We got a new principal. She drove out 50% of the staff in the first year, 65% in the second. I was one of those. And she's still over that high school right now in Washoe County. And so I absolutely understand that this is an issue. I have some questions that go along with some of my colleagues just about the details and how this would be in effect. I have to echo my colleague, Assemblyman Koenig's concerns of what if they're a one-star school? If they're already as low as possible, they have 65% leave, 70% leave the next year, but they can't drop any lower. How would this apply to that individual?
Marie Nisus for the record. So again, in the bill, it does say as assessed by NDE. So that's a question that they would have to answer. Now, being at a one-star school many years of when I was teaching, we would look at our test scores at the end of that year and analyze that. Did we drop in reading? Did we drop in math? And typically, it would be something like math. So then we would adjust what we are going to do in the fall. So to say that you couldn't drop lower than a one-star, if that was a system that was in place in the past, we couldn't drop below a 1, but we did look at our test scores to analyze that. But again, we were willing to work hard to make those changes. We didn't leave when we had a supportive administrator in the building.
Can I follow up to that? Thank you, Chair. And I appreciate that. I just think the language in the bill says drops one or more levels. And so I don't know if that's some fine tuning you're going to work on in amendments. May I have a second, Chair, along these lines? Thank you. I appreciate you. Okay. So my second question is, we know that there are situations where the district is not doing anything about these principals. We know they're getting moved to central office. They're getting moved to other schools. So this just seems to enable the superintendent or the board of trustees to remove someone. But does this bill guarantee that they actually would do any of that? Obviously, the mentorship would happen, but the removal, is that a guarantee or not?
Francesca Petrucci for the record. No, there is no guarantee. As the bill reads, if this happens in 2 consecutive years, they'd be put at will status. A survey would be done to kind of assess the culture and climate of the school. And then ultimately, based on the recommendation of the superintendent, the board of trustees, can either decide to, remove or, keep that principal. And again, we don't, in the 4 years that actually this was in statute, not one principal was removed, because that's not the intent of the bill. The bill is not meant to be punitive. The bill is meant to foster good culture and climate. And so, coming from, the teacher perspective, we don't want to see principals removed. And so that's what we're actually trying to mitigate here.
Thank you for that. And next we'll go to Vice Chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thanks to you both for being here and presenting this bill. Just a quick question from the monitoring standpoint. How do you envision that happening? Do you envision then each year, for an example, districts would monitor turnover, and obviously those ratings we know come out every year. How do you envision that looking?
Francesca Petrucci for the record. Thank you for the question. So we actually compile transiency data from the district. So the district actually logs each year the transiency of each school. And then NDE has, as Marie was mentioning, different assessments to kind of measure a school's performance over time based on, assessments and other factors too.
So if I just, maybe I should be a little more clear. So I know that that's something that CCEA does regularly. You stay on top of that because that's what you do, right? What's the district's role in that?
So the district's role in this regard would be to continue to monitor the transiency rates and also looking at school performance. It is the responsibility, of the district to be monitoring that. And NDE provides a portal, to measure growth and, in some cases decline. And so it would be, I think twofold, both on the district as well as depending on the Department of Ed's determination of what accountability metric is used, kind of looking at both of those avenues to kind of measure progress of these schools.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you so much.
Next, we will go to Assemblyman De Silva.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you again for bringing light to this issue. So first and foremost, I do want to say, as a teacher in Clark County, I know that the issue with school climate has become a growing concern. When the surveys go out, it starts conversations at our schools amongst teachers about the climate of our own schools, and it's shedding a light on the fact that there are, again, the vast majority of administrators are good people who are working diligently towards the betterment of their schools and their staff and the students, but there are some concerns that are popping up across the district. And it's something that we should all pay attention to. So again, also when it comes to legislation, I'm seeing very quickly in this body as a freshman that when we add certain strong measures, teeth, so to speak, to laws, it does help in regards to creating a greater sense of accountability, not just with our teachers and our students, but also with our district leaders and our administrators. So my question was more pointed towards the star rating. I know that's something that has come up many times. That's part and parcel of this legislation. What exactly are we looking at in regards to the levels that we're discussing? I'm familiar with the star rating. I don't know if we have somebody from Nevada Department of Education that could maybe speak a little bit more on to this fact. How do we actually measure those schools, and what would cause a school to drop in a rating, so to speak?
And since you're coming up here, I was actually going to call you up in a little bit, but we'll have you do it now. There's also kind of an issue, right, with if a school is at a 1-star with this legislation. So I don't know if you want to discuss that, but just, I guess, committee members, we can do some work on this, but please go ahead.
Hi, so Katie Broughton from the Department of Education. Thank you for the question, Assemblyman De Silva. The star rating factor takes into several accounts different various student achievement data. I can get you the metrics on what more specifically, but there's all sorts of student achievement data that's accounted for in that measurement. To speak to the 1-star, so there's no 0 stars or negative stars. You can still measure student achievement. There's like a raw score that you can get that could decrease. So even like similar to a grade, 50% F is different from a 30% F, but they both show as F. So you could see the raw score and a decrease in that, even though it still may show as a 1-star.
Yeah, and I actually, legal piped in and said that an easy fix would be is reduced by 1 or more levels to is reduced by 1 or more levels or at the lowest level possible. Might be, but we can deal with that offline. Assemblyman De Silva, did that answer your question? Thank you. Committee members, do we have other questions? Okay, not right now. So then we will open it up to support. Is there anyone in Las Vegas who would like to testify in support? Anyone in Carson City? Fill the chairs if you'd like to testify in support. And we'll begin in Vegas.
Good afternoon. My name is Angie Joy, and I'm a proud CCEA member and a second grade teacher at Ann Lynch Elementary School. I'm here today to share with you why Senate Bill 292 is vitally important. Teacher accountability is a continuous topic, but admin accountability is rarely referenced. The same way students thrive within a consistent and safe environment in school, so do teachers. Many admin are running their schools more like a wild reality show than a stable, supportive workplace. A survey from CCEA revealed that over 1,000 teachers stated that they had a bad administrator in place. Teachers cannot work in an unstable environment where spitefulness, negativity, and unprofessionalism reign supreme. I believe Senate Bill 292 will ensure that administrators focus on setting the climate to build strong, supported educators and realize there will be consequences for not providing a consistent professional environment. I personally know 3 strong teachers that have taught in this district for many years that walked away mid-year to being at a school with a bad administrator. After being disrespected in the workplace, talked down to, and made to feel they were not a part of the team, they all decided to quit. These teachers experienced bad admin at Title I schools, which have students with the greatest need. These teachers did not leave because of the student population or the parents, but directly because of the admin. Poor leadership is the reason teachers are forced to leave students and communities they've grown to love serving. There are many issues that make the job of a teacher difficult, and everyone knows that. We need strong admin that want to build strong, cohesive teams and not create chaotic work environments. We need admin that want to work with us and grow our potential so we can do the same for our students. Admin that will speak up for us and our students when issues arise instead of brushing aside our concerns about curriculum, testing, student attendance, or safety. This bill will ensure that admin know that this is a team effort, and if they cannot lead a successful team, they are accountable for that. Please give all teachers the support and security of a stable, cohesive working environment so we can focus our efforts on the teaching we would much rather dedicate our time to. For these reasons, I urge you to support Senate Bill 292. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next in Las Vegas.
Good afternoon. My name is Greta Blunt Johnson, and I'm just want to go on record to support Senate Bill 292, and I am a member of CCEA. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person.
Thank you, Chairwoman and committee members. This is Matt Niswonger again from Shadow Ridge High School and proud member of CCA as well. I also wanted to speak in favor of this bill. The culture and climate of a school are created by the principal, and we need to hold them accountable for that. High levels of transfers indicate a hostile workplace. Teachers don't want to leave a school. They only leave when they have an overtly negative experience. If I were a teacher and 50% of my students requested a transfer to the counselors, I shouldn't be a teacher anymore. An administrator should be held to the same standard. Unfortunately, with the merry-go-round of administrators in CCSD, school climates get disrupted much too frequently. This bill will help to force administrators to develop and cultivate a positive culture at their schools. Administrators need to be held more accountable than teachers. Right now, they have less oversight and less accountability than teachers. This has to change. Senate Bill 292 will help with that issue. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in Las Vegas? It doesn't appear so. Anyone here in Carson City wishing to speak in support? Okay, we will move to the phones. BPS, is there anyone on the phone line calling in support?
Callers, if you would like to testify in support of SB 292, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. One moment, Chair. Caller with the last 3 digits, 205. Please press star 6 to unmute your microphone. Please go ahead, caller.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jessica Jones. I'm a kindergarten teacher at a Title I school on the east side of Las Vegas. I'm also the secretary of the Clark County Education Association. I wanted to call today to support Senate Bill 292, specifically when 50% or more of the staff are requesting to transfer to another school. When principals lose staff for consecutive years, a deeper look needs to be taken at the leadership and climate in that school. Losing 50% of staff is alarming. I have taught at a school in Clark County where this has occurred. About 6 years ago, half of the staff, which were predominantly veteran educators, and also at a Title I school, transferred to other schools in the district. The administrator at that school created a very toxic work environment for the entire staff. I myself was confronted in the hallway and threatened in front of my students. You know, no one should ever have to experience any hostility in their workplace, but sadly, incidences like mine do occur. When an administrator loses 50% or more of their staff, there needs to be mechanisms in place to hold them accountable, just like we have measures in place to hold our educators accountable for their job performance. We should have accountability for all district personnel, including administrators, and for these reasons, I ask that you support Senate Bill 292. Thank you for your time.
Next caller.
Good afternoon, Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years in support of SB 292. NSCA prides ourselves on supporting or opposing bills based on the content, not on the sponsor. In particular, we are encouraged by language in Section 2 that indicates that or provides that for the first 3 years of an employment, a principal is at will or probationary. That is an equity issue with teachers. And so we support SB 292. Thank you.
Next caller.
Good afternoon, members of the committee. My name is Dan Price. I'm a CTE teacher at Sunrise Mountain High School and a proud member of the Clark County Education Association. I'm here today to speak in support of Senate Bill 292. Came into teaching from the private sector, both as a business owner and an employee for several major corporations. Management accountability has always been an important part of running any good business. School administrators, the people who are on the charge of educating our students, do not have any. They can pretty much run their schools with very little accountability. They set the tone of education in the building for both educators and students. This bill puts accountability back, just like I have to be evaluated multiple observations a year, interview my students, and meet professional standards set by the state. Administrators should have to do the same. If they are not doing their job correctly, they should be placed back on probation and helped to be a better administrator or to be removed so someone more qualified can take over. If a large number of teachers are leaving the building year after year, the administration should be held accountable. I urge you to pass SB 292 and put equity and accountability back in our schools. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next caller.
My name is Robert Holloway. I'm a proud executive board member of the Clark County Education Association. I'm testifying today in support of SB 292. Teacher accountability has been the forefront of the conversation about improving student outcomes for the bulk of my career as an educator. Professional accountability means that teachers cannot close their doors and teach any way they please. Data is gathered, observations and feedback are given, adjustments are made to our educational practice over the course of a 3-year probationary period. In contrast, the 1-year probationary period for school administrators has allowed them to be deemed post-probationary before the first set of the school's results under their stewardship is reported. Education data is constantly trailing indicator, and even results from a school principal's first year are often the result of what a school's previous leader put in place. Only after the second year does their effectiveness begin to come into focus. School climate is a major factor in educators leaving a school and often the profession. As is the case in any industry, people do not quit jobs, they quit poor leaders. According to Superintendent Jara's testimony, Clark County School District has 1,400 vacancies in the current school year alone. This is why it's critically important to reinstate a 3-year probationary period for school administrators. As the lead instructor of a school, we should hold those who rise to the position at least to the level of accountability we do for rank and file educators. It's time to end the double standard. I urge you to support SB 292.
Thank you. Next caller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Jim Frazee. I'm a classroom educator in CCSD and I also have the honor of being Vice President of CCEA. This is not an anti-administrator bill. No competent principal is afraid of this bill. This bill only addresses the worst of the worst. This bill is 100% about student achievement. Students don't come to and don't perform well in schools that have a toxic environment. Just as educators go wherever they feel needed and valued, this bill will not stop any competent administrator from going into a challenging school. I urge you to support SB 292. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next caller.
One moment, Chair.
Good afternoon, committee chair and members. My name is Vanessa Edmonds. I'm a veteran educator of over 20 years with the Clark County School District, and I'm a proud member of the Clark County Education Association. Administrators make a profound impact on staff retention and successful student outcomes. Teachers and children flourish in a safe and stable environment. Just as educators and licensed staff are held under a microscope with evaluations and survey results, administrators should also be held accountable for their results. It is an injustice and a disservice to a community when an administrator uses bullying tactics and creates a toxic workplace. Schools require an empathetic and developed leader, not an inconsistent entry-level manager. I urge you to strongly support teachers. Passing Senate Bill 292 will provide rehabilitation and accountability for administrators. I strongly support this bill. Thank you for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Next caller.
Hello, my name is Emily Poulter, and I'm a second grade teacher at Bunker Elementary. I have taught at Bunker for 7 years, and I have taught in CCSD for 18. I am speaking to you today to emphasize the crucial role that a principal's leadership plays in creating and thriving community. As a teacher, I have learned from my experiences that a principal's role is crucial in shaping the learning environment for students, fostering relationships between teachers, parents, and students, and establishing a positive school culture. This situation is all too familiar to me. I've experienced the destruction of my previous school community I taught in for 11 years due to poor leadership. Poor leadership is all too common and routine in this district. The question we should be asking ourselves is not why is this happening, but how do we stop it from continuing? A principal's leadership style can significantly impact student achievement, teacher retention, and overall student success. Effective principals are known for leading with vision, building a strong sense of community, and creating a culture of trust and collaboration. We had all of this before at Bunker for years. Seeing, feeling, and living the purposeful dismantling of something we worked so hard to build is disheartening. This supportive, loving, thriving community of learners is no more. A principal's leadership is particularly critical in a building, a sense of community within a school. When a principal chooses to close the door to teachers, parents, and students, when a principal does not share the vision of the school, when a principal does not hear all voices, when a principal does not foster a sense of belonging for teachers, parents, and students, a school collapse is inevitable. You can't snap your fingers and magically bring back this mangled community. Bunker did not need to be torn apart to gain any potential. We had a vision for our school community success. We recently became a designated STEM school. We had a vision for our future. We had motivated veteran teachers working together, striving to push our school forward in our vision. Now that vision is lost, and Bunker community will never be the same. In summary, a principal's leadership is a critical factor in the success of a school. By holding principals accountable for building a strong sense of community and fostering trust and collaboration amongst all stakeholders, Senate Bill 292 can provide the ongoing support and supervision needed to create a conducive learning community. Thank you for hearing me today.
Thank you. Next caller.
Hello, my name is Dakuba Porter. I work at Parson Elementary School, and I'm a proud member of CCEA. I am totally in support of Senate Bill 292. I have been an educator for 17 years, 6 of those years, I worked as both a principal and assistant principal of turnaround schools. I happen to be in a building with great administrators. However, I understand that this isn't always the case. I feel that it is our duty to ensure that the leader of the school knows how to lead in a way that produces a positive school climate and culture. A positive school climate is necessary for staff retention, which leads to better teachers, which in turn leads to higher quality of education for students. In education, accountability is paramount. This bill would allow for accountability among administrators. Any great leader would agree with the provisions of this bill. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, BPS. Are there more callers?
One moment, Chair. Caller with the last 3 digits 900, please press *6 to unmute your microphone. Chair, there are no more callers choosing to provide support testimony at this time.
Thank you very much. And with that, we will close support testimony and move to opposition. Is there anyone here? Go ahead and fill up those seats. Anyone in Las Vegas, if you are in opposition, please come fill in those seats. Not seeing anyone, so please begin here in Carson.
Good afternoon, Chair Bill Bray Axelrod and members of the Assembly Education Committee. My name is Jeff Horn, and I am the Executive Director of the Clark County Association of School Administrators and Professional Technical Employees. I represent over 1,400 CCSD administrators, of which nearly 98% are members. Out of those 1,400 plus administrators, I represent each of the 360 plus site-based principals. CASAPI supports Section 2, subsection 1, requiring a 3-year probationary period for all newly hired principals. We believe that this is fair and reflects similar requirements for other licensed staff. However, CASAPI believes that Section 2, subsection 2, and beyond describes a seldom, if ever, set of circumstances that would ultimately end in the dismissal of a veteran CCSD administrator. This bill would forego any opportunity for due process or progressive discipline and does nothing to address or hold principal supervisors accountable for this unlikely set of circumstances. To my knowledge, not one principal, since the star ratings have been in place, which I believe is 10 years, would have met the criteria for dismissal as outlined in this bill. CASAPI believes that site-based administrators should be held accountable, and that all schools must be led by individuals who create nurturing and supportive educational environments. I appreciate recent conversations with Senator Pezzina and her willingness to meet and discuss concerns with CASAPI and other stakeholders in the near future. I'm optimistic that we will be able to effectively address the underlying concern regarding instances of poor school climate and culture. I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you. Please go ahead.
Good afternoon, members of the Assembly Committee on Education. My name is Freeman Holbrook. I am the president of the Washoe School Principals Association, where I represent 98% as well of the administrators in Washoe County. I've submitted some additional notes as well, but today I'm here to voice our complete opposition to Senate Bill 292. Please listen to the people who can speak from practice. Unlike many of the individuals that have spoke to you today, I have been a teacher in Nevada, but I've also been a dean, an assistant principal, and a principal. And I can tell you this because each time that I was promoted, I went through another probationary cycle and was held to the expectations suited for my position. This bill creates an inequity in expectations, and I get nervous that the next step will be holding teachers to this level of accountability with language such as at-will employees dismissed and removed when a student wants out of their classroom. We already have in practice today probationary periods for all administrators identical to those of teachers, which I put into the notes I submitted to you today. Once a teacher is promoted into administration as an assistant principal or any admin position, they are put into the same exact probation cycle again. When they are promoted within our membership to principal, they enter that probation for a third time. I have now been through that probation 3 different times with 3 years each time. And so in Washoe County, that is identical to what a teacher would go through. And An administrator must enter effective or highly effective every step of the way to enter, or they will also enter a peer review assistance program identical to that as a teacher. So they are receiving the same support and the same mentorship. To make it to the post-probationary stage of administration, you must have made it through those 3 cycles of probation with this option of support throughout the way. SB 292 would negatively and immediately affect some of our students and staff who need our strongest leaders. SB 292 moves forward an equity gap that already exists and will become worse. Veteran and well-established principals will naturally flow towards schools where students and families have all the support they need. And although outside influences can affect the education of any student, it is not as affluent at these schools. Younger and first-year principals will only have opportunities to apply at schools where they are now going to be at will and with an uphill climb due to some outside influence they may not be able to control. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else here in Carson? Not seeing anyone? Oh, this is the problem with Koning's head. I'm sorry. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. AJ Delap with the Griffin Company on behalf of the Nevada Association of School Administrators. We as well are in opposition to the bill, specifically language beyond Section 2, 1. So we're going to jump into Section 2, Sub 2, which is the language that that speaks beyond the probationary period and such. We've had conversations with the bill sponsor. We're encouraged by that. We're looking forward to those possibly occurring next week. There's stakeholders that are going to be involved in that, and I'm very appreciative of that opportunity to express our concerns. And with that, I will conclude my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I didn't see you. Anyone else here in Carson? Okay, we will go to the phone lines. BPS, do we have callers in opposition?
Callers, if you would like to testify in opposition to SB 292, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to provide opposition testimony at this time.
Okay, with that, we will move to neutral. Anyone in Las Vegas? I'm not seeing anyone. Anyone here in Carson City in neutral? No? Anyone on the phone line in neutral?
Callers, if you would like to testify in neutral for SB 292, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to provide neutral testimony at this time.
Okay, and seeing that the senator had to leave, did you guys have any closing remarks? Okay.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, my name is Marie Nices. And again, I want to be clear, this bill is not meant to be punitive. It's meant to provide supports so that we have the best leaders at every building. We want there to be an effective administrator at every school, and we want our schools to have a positive collaborative environment so teachers can teach and students can learn. Thank you.
Francesca Petrucci for the record. Want to thank the committee for the time, and to echo what Marie said, this is about culture and climate. Again, to reiterate, I think this came up before, but this does not disincentivize principals from going to challenging schools. Again, there is no shortage of principals. These folks are chomping at the bit to get in these positions. And the goal of this is to really foster good culture and climate at these schools. And as Marie alluded to, she was at a at-risk title school, that she had spent most of her career at until, ineffective administrator came to the school. So again, this is solely about fostering positive culture and climate at the schools, which will, in effect, really help these challenging schools.
Thank you for your testimony. With that, I will close the hearing on SB 292, which brings us to our final agenda item, which is public comment. Anyone in Las Vegas? Looks like we have cleared the room in Vegas. Anyone up here in Carson City wishing to make public comment? Everyone's headed for the door. BPS, is there anyone on the phone line?
Callers, if you would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 to take your place in the queue. Chair, there are no callers choosing to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you so much for that. Okay, with that, that is it, people. So I will see you on Thursday at 1:30. With that, we are adjourned. Remember to be on the floor at 4:45 for our special speaker.